You probably know him for the cars, but Nikola Tesla was working on cell phone technology, particle beam weapons, and robotics over 100 years ago. This is Robert Manni, host of Guys TV, and this week my special guest is Marc Seifer. We're going to talk about Tesla right here, right now on Guys TV. You can also catch me on KCAA Radio here in Southern California and Guys Radio, my worldwide podcast. Guys TV, Guys Radio, thanks for your support. Okay, today we're going to talk about one of the most famous inventors and one of the most brilliant minds in the history of mankind. His name is Nikola Tesla. My special guest's name is Marc Seifer. He's a PhD. He's a leading Tesla historian, author of the widely acclaimed book Tesla Wizard. He's been featured in the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, Scientific American, Cerebrum, and Nature. Marc is the author of Wizard, The Life and Times of Nikola Tesla. It's a definitive book on handwriting analysis and dozens other works of nonfiction and fiction. So beyond the Tesla book, he's also wrote a book about handwriting analysis. He's been on Coast to Coast Radio, NPR, the History Channel, and also featured in the 5-part limited series, The Tesla Files, which is now on Amazon. So we're going to talk about Tesla. He's the guy who may have invented the induction motor, the hydroelectric power system, our energy grid, fluorescent neon lights, remote control robotics, the particle beam weapon, wireless channels, cell phone frequencies, all of that stuff. The new book is called Tesla Wizard at War, the Genius, the Particle Beam Weapon, and the Pursuit of Power. It's just an amazing individual, and Marc's done an amazing job researching him and probably being one of the world's foremost experts on Nikola Tesla. So welcome to Guys Radio. Thanks for being here, Marc.
Thanks so much for having me, Robert.
So let's start right at the beginning. Mike, there's an entire generation of people who really don't know too much about Nikola Tesla, even though with the advent of the vehicle that's out there and Elon Musk, people are now talking about Tesla. But I'm not sure how many people actually make that connection. What is it about Tesla that drew you and now millions and others who are now learning his name and now learning about his work? What makes him so special and different from all the other inventors and visionaries of the last 100 years or so?
Well, really what happened for me was I got to go all the way back to 1976. I was writing an article on somebody else, and I came across this article about a man who invented all those things that you listed: the induction motor, hydroelectric power system, remote control, wireless communication, etc. And I said, this guy couldn't possibly exist, because if he existed, I would know his name. So I'm in the library, New York Public Library, and I look him up in this article from 1905 on high frequency phenomena. So I go, this guy really existed. So when I come back to Rhode Island, working for Howard Smuckler, who was the editor of Ancient Astronauts and ESP magazine, I was writing articles for them. He said, oh yeah. And he gives me the O'Neill biography, which is the first major biography on Tesla. And he gives me another book called Tesla and the Venusian Spaceship, which suggested that Tesla was still alive, which was 1976. He'd be at 114 years old, floating around in space, and then he lands in this guy's backyard, Arthur Matthews' backyard. That's how I was introduced to him. So when I did a little bit more research, I got a book of his patents, which was 1,000 pages, lectures, articles, and patents. And I said, this is a huge story, because I had the solid patents. And that's really how I got interested in Tesla. And then, through the years with the internet and everything, his name has risen to the top. But in those days, in the 1970s and 80s, he was completely unknown. He had totally disappeared from the history books.
Now, why do you think that is? I know when he passed, and we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves here, but when he passed, his records and all were taken and sealed, and we don't know exactly where they are now. And he was working on some, and part of what your book is about, this particle beam weapon, and about some military technology that we didn't want to get into the wrong hands. What happened to him? And why is everybody talking about Tesla now?
Yeah, this is a great question, and it was the subject of my doctoral dissertation. If he really was the inventor of the hydroelectric power system and wireless communication, how could we not know his name? And so I went into the history of all these inventions. Who invented the mouse, the computer mouse? I don't know who invented it. Who invented contact lenses? So we've got these very powerful, important inventions, and we don't know who invented them. The main reason why Tesla's name disappeared was because Marconi beat him in sending an impulse across the Atlantic Ocean before Tesla did, and J.P. Morgan pulled Tesla's funding in wireless communication. Once that happened, you forget, like, who ran for vice president, when so-and-so was running for president. We tend not to remember second people that come in second. And so Tesla was coming in second in that case, and that's really why his name basically disappeared. Now, the other question is, why did it reappear? Tesla had a great sense of camp and a sense of humor, and these fantastic photos of him surrounded by lightning. I think once they got back onto the internet, that was one of the reasons. And the other reason, of course, is Elon Musk. He kept the name Tesla Motors. He was thinking of actually getting rid of the name Tesla Motors when he bought the company. And he made the correct decision to keep that name. And Tesla Motors is doing so incredibly well. And Elon Musk is he's the Tesla of today. And I think those two reasons, the fantastic photos on the internet of Tesla, and also his story is just so amazing. I think my first book, Wizard, The Life and Times of Nikola Tesla, played a role too in helping resurrect his name. So those are some of the reasons why his name reappeared, but it had completely disappeared from history for about 40 or 50 years.
It's really interesting. When I went through the book, and a lot of other people I've talked to and interviewed over the years, and one hypothesis, if you will, that comes up is that the human body is kind of like a battery. And if you send electronic pulses in it, for instance, there's a gentleman, he passed recently, Patrick Flanagan, and he said one of the healthiest things you can do is take a bath in very low electrical current water that has a very low electrical current. I'm not recommending that anybody out there do this, but the idea was that our bodies are like batteries. And I actually have something called a neopulsar, which I put in the bottom of my sock at night, and it gives you a little pulse. And what it supposedly does is it will kill off bad bacteria, and only the good bacteria can live. So it'll kill off viruses and things like that. And of course, it's like very under the radar type of thing. But the idea, the concept of the body, the human body being kind of electrically driven, that seems to be the basis of so much of Tesla's work. What do you think about that, Mark?
It's a great question, and there's a lot of interesting answers to that. He is the inventor of electrotherapy. When you go to a chiropractor and they put those electrodes on your back, what you're talking about, and I'd really like to know more about that pulse. What's happening is that electricity is changing the oxygen in your body, O2, into O3. It's changing it into ozone, and ozone kills viruses.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons, that it worked. Tesla had invented an ozone generator, and ozone will kill the COVID virus. And he was selling ozone generators to medical community in the early 1900s. And now he's a huge hero in the ozone therapy community. I have a new book coming out on ozone therapy, so I'm very aware of all this. And I'm very interested in that pulse that you're talking about. But that's what's happening. And Tesla was also working with people that had cancer, and working with doctors that believed that sending electricity through the body would kill cancer. So I totally agree. We are an electrical body, electrical battery, and electrical impulses. In his 80s, towards the end of his life, he said, "I've been studying electricity for all these years and all the amazing things." He said, "I still don't know what electricity is." And that's, an amazing statement from a guy who knows everything about electricity. But it is the source of life. There's so many mysteries involved in that.
Okay, my special guest on Guys Radio is Marc J. Seifer. He's written this book, the second one on Tesla, called Tesla Wizard at War. So before we get into the war aspect of this, for the benefit of some of our audience who may not be super familiar with Tesla, besides knowing about the car, kind of who was he and how did he get started doing his work? There's so much about his life, and I'm amazed that he really didn't seem like he had assistants or he had somebody managing his finances, and he got himself into so many messes over the years, even though he was so brilliant. So who was he, and how did he come to prominence in terms of working with electricity, if you will?
He was born in Croatia, in a little town called Smiljan. I've been there, and it's about 150 miles from Rome as the crow flies across the Adriatic Sea, but it's in the middle of nowhere. they were ox carts when I was there in the 1980s. And it's along a mountain, and there's a long plain, and way off in the distance are the Dinaric Alps. I'm sure he saw lightning storms way off in the distance coming across the plain, and bathing his house, with lightning. He was part of the educated elite. His father was a minister, a Greek Orthodox priest who can get married, obviously. And his mother was related to the regional bishop. She was actually higher up on the hierarchy than his father. So he was highly intelligent, and he went to the University of Graz, which was kind of like the MIT of Austria. And then he went to the University of Prague. He was a mathematics major. There's this myth that he didn't understand Maxwell's equations, which is completely ridiculous. The complicated mathematics that he's involved with will make your head spin. I mean, his mathematics are amazing. So he's a college educated guy. And at the time, there was a big problem of that direct current could only send electricity about a mile. And what Tesla knew was that electricity by its nature is alternating, which means it alternates its direction of flow at thousands of miles a second. So picture a river going downstream, then upstream, then downstream at thousands of times in a second. How can you make a water wheel go in one direction? That was the problem in those days. So what they did was they eliminated the upflow and only used the downflow. And that's what direct current was. So the world that he was in, direct current could only send energy about a mile, power dropping off over a distance, and only for lighting homes. Tesla felt you could do away with the commutator, which was creating that situation, and harness alternating current unencumbered. And his teacher, Professor Poschel, said, "I know you're brilliant, Mr. Tesla, but that's a perpetual motion scheme. It can never be done." And Tesla spent 5 years of daily research trying to figure out how to do away with the commutator. And he discovered how. And he was actually working for Edison just about at the same exact time in Paris. And so he comes to New York to try and sell this idea to Edison. And Edison says, "Come on, how can you have an electricity going two directions at once almost? You can't do this. I don't want to hear anything about AC. DC is the way to go." And so they ran into a personality dispute and money dispute. And Tesla was a ditch digger for a year. And then Westinghouse purchased his patents, and that became the war of the currents, AC versus DC. And what the public didn't realize, it was kind of like an ox cart versus a rocket ship. Tesla had the rocket ship, Edison had the ox cart, but Edison had the name. So Edison was electrocuting cats and dogs and even a horse and an elephant. And he got the AC as the electric chair. So there was this big PR campaign against Westinghouse. And this explains why Tesla had such difficulty in financing. Westinghouse says, "I can't pay you your royalty contract. I can't afford this. I'm fighting Edison in the courts, and we want to harness Niagara Falls, but we can't. We just can't do it. We're running out of money." Tesla said, "You know what? I'll rip up the royalty contract if you promise to go all the way into AC." And so they did that, and Tesla spoke as the inventor of the hydroelectric power system at Niagara Falls. And the one thing I want to say, Robert, about the hydroelectric power system, it's clean energy, it's renewable, and it runs forever as long as Niagara Falls. And so and from this one place, he wiped out 3,000 local power stations all throughout the Northeast, and not only for lighting homes, but for running factories for hundreds of miles in every single direction. So he became world famous at that point. And he had a lot of money, but he gave up a tremendous amount of money, a source of future income through ripping up the royalty contract. And that's really, eventually that caught up to him. And so that's why he had money problems later on.
Wow, amazing and great answer. Thank you for sharing that. So there was a lot of people as he started to really be noticed as somebody who had like a really big brain for how to work with electricity and do some of the things he could do, which was far more advanced than Edison or Marconi. Who was pulling at him? And there was a lot going on there because, he had the keys to the kingdom in a lot of ways. And who was pulling at him? I know J.P. Morgan had an interest in him, and you mentioned Westinghouse. What do you think happened then? Then the World War I came along, and then everybody was kind of after his technology, and he was open for bidding. Apparently, he talked about, well, maybe I'll sell some of my technology to the Russians for a particle beam weapon, etc. What do you think happened? It got very kind of busy and confusing during about a 20-year period of his life.
Yeah, what the interesting thing to me about Tesla is that his life gets more and more interesting as he goes through his life. So the War of the Currents is through the early 1890s and ends about in 1897 when Niagara Falls is harnessed. And he wins the War of the Currents. And Edison now has more respect for him. In fact, when Tesla's lab burnt to the ground in 1895, Edison provided a lab until Tesla could create another lab. But at the inauguration of the hydroelectric power system, Tesla lectures before all the greats of the day. And he says, you know what? I got even a better idea than this. We don't need wires. I'm going to be able to jump continents, send wireless power. And it was a crazy thing to do because we're still using the hydroelectric power system exactly as he invented it. So he kind of undid himself in a way because he said, I could do this other amazing thing. So now he's racing Marconi in the world of wireless, and he hooks up with J.P. Morgan. Morgan gives him $150,000 to build a wireless plant out on Long Island in 1901. And Morgan tells him, he says, look, I'm giving you $150,000, but that's all you're going to get from me. You're not going to get another cent. And I don't want to hear about, anything, any problems. Tesla says, all right, don't worry about it. And so Morgan goes off to Europe, and Marconi writes an article saying, you know how you do wireless communication? You take a Tesla coil and you do this and you do that. And Tesla freaked out because Tesla had offered Marconi his equipment, and Marconi said, no, I don't need it. And now he's publishing that he's using it. So Tesla decides to double the size of the tower. He figures that if he doubles the size of the tower, not only will he get to Europe, but it'll go all the way to Japan and China and Australia. So the revenues won't be double. The revenues will be almost infinite because he'll control the entire world from this one giant tower. That was his thinking. But when Morgan comes back, there's a stock market crash, partly caused by Morgan. Morgan can't believe that Tesla doubled the size of the contract, the tower, and now is asking for more money. And so Morgan shuts him off. And now he can't complete the tower. And Tesla says, yeah, I know I did that, but I have the ability to create an unlimited number of wireless channels. Tesla is the inventor of cell phone technology. He's able to multiply frequencies. Marconi is just able to put dots and dashes in Morse code. But Tesla's got the ability to send voice, pictures, and power, but Morgan has cut him off, and that's the reason why. And so Tesla partly is to blame for his own undoing. And now he spends, so that's 1901, all the way through the beginning of World War I. He's now working for the Germans.
Let me butt in on this one because I think it's so fascinating. So this is over 100 years ago. He had cell phone technology. So why didn't somebody see the money? And he had these big financiers interested in his work, and the biggest brains and the biggest finance people at the time were watching him closely. Why was this technology kind of put aside for like 80 years or so?
He would literally meet with Henry Clay Frick. Frick was given $60 million by J.P. Morgan when U.S. Steel was created. Carnegie got, I think, 320 million, and Frick got 60. And Frick is living in the Waldorf Astoria, and Tesla's living in the Waldorf Astoria. And so he says to Tesla, what's going on here? Why doesn't Morgan give you the rest of the money? And Tesla says, Morgan said he would just give me 150,000. I got to raise the rest by myself. Please meet with Morgan. So Frick meets with Morgan, and the deal's not done. The only conclusion you can come to answer your question is that Morgan literally blocked all these other financiers, Thomas Fortune Ryan, Jacob Schiff, all these other, they're billionaires in today's dollars, that Tesla was negotiating with, willing to give him money, and Morgan stopped them. And I think one of the reasons Morgan stopped them was he was afraid of wireless communication. He had rubber plantations, he had copper mines, he had lumber yards. He wanted wires. And plus, how do you build a wireless system? We have computers now to do it, but he didn't know how the money would come in, not realizing it was a paradigm shift. It's an entirely new way that money would come in. You're of my age when we would not pay for radio and television, and yet radio and television was free, and it generated billions and billions of dollars and made many multimillionaires
through advertising money. So your screen has frozen. So I'm going to wait for you here, Mark. Let's see what happens. Okay, Mark's screen has frozen.
Is it still frozen?
Now we're good. We're good.
Okay, good. Great.
Okay. Go ahead with your answer.
The money would come in a different way. It was through advertising, but it was a paradigm shift. Morgan couldn't understand that, so he stopped Tesla from building the tower. And Tesla's pleading with him, saying, "Every night my pillow is bathed with tears. Can't I make you understand what's going on here? I'm going to advance the world a century." And Morgan just cuts him off. It's a very, very sad story. So that's really when he started to disappear from history, because Morgan just squashed his wireless plans. He had this huge tower, and it was dormant for all those years.
And then it was wasn't it destroyed by FDR because there was some concerns about that it might be something that put us in a vulnerable position during the war?
Well, what happened was during World War I, Tesla was working for the Germans, and the Sayville plant out on Long Island, which was near Wardenclyffe. One of the big questions was Tesla, would his plans really have worked? And the reason he was working for the Germans was because the Germans understood that he would help them tremendously. So when he got onto the German site, he said, "You're spending too much energy sending it through the air. You got to send this energy through the earth." And when they followed his plans, the New York Times reports Sayville triples its power and is now the most powerful wireless plant on the planet. And I think that that is what the one article which really establishes that Tesla knew what he was talking about. So this is World War I. We're still not in the war. And in fact, we are using German equipment on our US Navy ships. And Franklin Roosevelt is the Assistant Secretary of the Navy. Marconi sues the Navy and sues Telefunken. And the reason why they're not going to lose the suit is because Tesla has priority over Marconi. So actually, FDR was on Tesla's side at this time. And the reason that the tower was taken down, Tesla owed the Waldorf Astoria $20,000, transferred the property to them, and they unfortunately destroyed the tower just for the salvage, just to recoup some of the money.
Well, your book's about, a lot of it's about Tesla and his impact on war. So let's talk about this death ray. He claimed that he had this particle beam, and I'm not laughing. I'm laughing at the irony, the fact that he had invented something that is so powerful, yet it got bungled, along with so many other things that have happened over the years in terms of great inventions that never saw the light of day. So he claimed he had a particle beam weapon, which is like a ray gun type of thing, where he could disintegrate, planes or whatever, and would be the game changer in all war. So you would think everybody would be after that, and that would get out there, and somebody got it, but it seems like nobody got it. So what happened?
It's a very complicated story, and it actually covers World War I and World War II. As they're getting ready to take down his tower, Tesla reveals that he can use that tower with his death ray. And a big New York Times article, a man with a switch can knock down planes from Tesla's tower out on Long Island. So he's pleading to Wilson, to try and protect the tower, and it didn't work, and they took the tower down. So now that's 1915. So now 20 years later, 1935, he's perfecting this particle beam weapon, and he actually sells the details to the Soviet Union. I was able to get declassified documents from the Soviet Union, and I was able to find out that Joseph Stalin himself had to okay the payment of $25,000. So Tesla's negotiating literally with Joseph Stalin in 1935. And they eventually become our allies during World War I and World War II, and it wasn't illegal. He also now tries to sell it to the British because he's afraid that the Germans will attack Great Britain. And one of the people he's negotiating with is General Andrew McNaughton. Now, I did not know who he was when I first got into this research. Well, who the heck is Andrew McNaughton? Well, he's on the cover of Time magazine and the cover of Life magazine. He was third in line to be head of Allied forces after Eisenhower and Mountbatten. That's who he is. He's the head of secret weapons development for the Canadian government and thus for the British Empire. He's negotiating with Andrew McNaughton. There's many letters between the two of them. And McNaughton, unlike the Americans who were skeptical of Tesla, wants to figure out what the heck this is. And McNaughton sends scientists to meet with Tesla in the 1930s to figure out how this thing works. The problem with it is that it was not a simple thing. What Tesla come up with was a particle beam. If you send a flashlight into the sky, it loses all of its power. He had to concentrate the energy. And to concentrate the energy, he cut off tiny little pieces of tungsten and repel them out this gun. So you'd have a stream of particles. That's what a particle beam weapon is. But the instrumentation is very, very complicated. We located a letter from Franklin Roosevelt while Tesla was still alive, wanting to meet with Tesla, because Roosevelt now knows whoever gets the atom bomb is
Right.
going to win World War II. And would Tesla's particle beam weapon protect America from a plane which could carry an atom bomb, which could be dropped on New York? So that's the kind of thing that's going on. And so you've got two groups, one group which doesn't believe in Tesla, headed by Vannevar Bush, who's the head of the Manhattan Project, and another group headed by General L.C. Craigie, who was the first military guy to fly a jet plane during World War II. He thinks we should study this at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So I get into the drama of the two different warring factions of who to believe. But the truth of the matter was, it took a tremendous amount of energy. We spent, in today's dollars, probably trillions of dollars to build the atom bomb. To build Tesla's particle beam weapon would not have been an easy matter. It would have cost hundreds of millions of dollars. There's a lot involved. One of the biggest problems was he had so much energy. How do you protect it without melting the equipment? So the heat was involved, and so that's really part of what was going on here was which weapon should you go with? And they went with the atom bomb, which of course made great sense because clearly whoever got the atom bomb first would have won the war.
Okay, after that, Mark, then what happened with this particle beam technology? Is this something that's being, I can't believe that they just dropped it and said, okay, atom bomb, because as we know, atom bomb's not what I would call a very clean way of managing the planet, because, and the way it was used on these, innocent people in the cities and everything, it's like, it's not the same as taking out military apparatus with a, ray gun, if you will, a mega ray gun. So what happened after that, in your opinion?
Well, what happened right after Tesla died, Vannevar Bush sent John G. Trump to look at Tesla's papers. Trump was a physicist at MIT working with Van de Graaff. Now, I knew the Trump report. I had this, the Trump report since the 1990s, and I knew Donald Trump, but I never tied the two together. I thought they were two different people, unrelated. When we made the television show, the Tesla Files, we found out that John G. Trump was Donald Trump's uncle. So it's just this incredible coincidence. But he was highly educated. He was the good guy to do this, and he studied Tesla's papers, and he concluded, "Don't worry about it. You can send it to Yugoslavia, to a communist country. There's no problem here." But L.C. Craigie, General Craigie, said, "No, we got to protect this. This is important. We got." So you have these two warring groups, and what happened was the U.S. government sat on Tesla's papers for 10 years and studied them. And so what happened eventually with his invention was they worked on it and worked on it. He had another invention. He called it a flivver plane. It took off like a helicopter and then rotated into the airplane position. And the head of Bell Labs was one of the people working with Vannevar Bush. He was putting down Tesla, and meanwhile, Bell Labs is the people that created the Osprey helicopter. If you Google the Osprey helicopter airplane, I'll give you a medal if you could find Tesla's name. But Tesla really is the inventor of that. So there were military inventions in Tesla's secret papers, and those are two of the most important ones. The particle beam weapon evolved into what's called the railgun. The railgun is a very highly effective and inexpensive way to take down planes and uses the exact same principle that Tesla was using, and that is repulsion, electrical repulsion, repulsing out an object which would take down a plane, as opposed to shooting a cannon or some other mechanism. But there's a lot more to his particle beam weapon. He also felt that it was a way to communicate with other planets. I think the trunk lines that we have, wireless trunk lines, are linked to that, microwave trunk lines, that kind of thing. So there's a lot more to this invention than just as a weapon.
During your research, Mark, what was and you've done a lot of it, and congratulations, just amazing work you're doing. What was the biggest, oh wow, concept that came across, the learning that you found, like, I can't believe this, I didn't know this, like the biggest surprise? And what do you think was Tesla's greatest achievement?
I had a couple of huge surprises in writing the new book, Tesla Wizard at War. One was that you have this image of this old guy feeding the pigeons, living in a hotel in New York, as poor as can be. That's not what's going on. Tesla's negotiating with Joseph Stalin, with Andrew McNaughton, who's Winston Churchill's right-hand man, third in line to be head of Allied forces, with Franklin Roosevelt himself, who writes a letter wanting to meet with Tesla, with Vannevar Bush, the head of the Manhattan Project. Tesla was negotiating with the very height of power as World War I was in the midst of. He dies in 1943. So throughout the early part of the war, they're very interested in who he is. In my book, I've got 5 or 6 Nobel Prize winners all congratulating Tesla on his 75th birthday. So that was one of the biggest surprises to me, that Tesla wasn't this old doddering guy, that he was actually totally in the game right at the end of his life. The other big thing for me, the big wow, was his explanation of what gravity was. I always thought we were attracted to the earth. I never understood why the people in Australia don't fall off the earth, frankly, but that's a kind of a joke, but I still really don't understand it totally. But anyhow, Tesla had a whole different view of gravity. Einstein spent 40 years, the last 40 years of his life, trying to combine electromagnetism with gravity. I'm going to try and do it in about 2 minutes. And it's all because of Tesla. What Tesla said is the reason why we fall back to the earth when we jump up is not because we're attracted to the earth, but because all of matter is absorbing energy all of the time. So the earth is absorbing energy all the time. So when you jump up, you're in the way of this influx, and so you fall back down. But you're absorbing energy. The pen over here is absorbing, the book is absorbing energy, my glasses, everything's absorbing energy, but the earth is absorbing a tremendous amount of energy. That's what gravity is, according to Tesla. So I thought about this a little farther. I said, well, if that means that, then elementary particles are absorbing energy all the time. What's making them spin? Now, I read George Gamo's book. Gamow was one of the forefathers of quantum physics. He wrote a book, 30 Years That Shook Physics. And he wrote that when they first measured particle spin, particles were spinning faster than the speed of light. They needed to spin faster than the speed of light to generate electromagnetism. And I go, wow, that's unbelievable. But it violated relativity. So what they did was they said, let's call the particle spin the square root of -1, which is an imaginary number. Dirac did this. He got a Nobel Prize for this. So by calling it the square root of -1, they were able to combine electromagnetism with the other 3 forces, that make everything up. There are 4 forces: the strong nuclear force, a weak nuclear force, electromagnetism, and gravity. But they couldn't get gravity in there. Now, here's what I think. If matter is being absorbed all of the time, if elementary particles are absorbing matter, energy, etheric energy all the time, causing it to spin faster than the speed of light, and that spinning is creating electromagnetism, which is what Gamow said, that's grand unification. That's combining gravity with electromagnetism. Electromagnetism is caused by the elementary particles, and they don't know what gravity is really. And I'm telling you what I think gravity is: the Higgs boson, the God particle. It's the absorption of etheric energy. So I got all that from Tesla, and I think that's one of the biggest wows I came up with.
Does that support kind of the theory that if everything is kind of space or frequency, and matter is pulled together by this God particle, so that creates, like, the book here or the desk or whatever, but everything is really just energy and frequency, and this is the God particle as a way of pulling it together, so we have all these tangible things, if you will.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it is.
Okay.
And one of the big things about it is the ether exists. I quote that Einstein himself says the ether exists in the book. It's from Walter Isaacson's major book on Einstein. A lot of physicists think there is no ether, which is absurd. And what Tesla is saying is the ether is probably an alternating current oscillating at trillions of times a second. It's oscillating so fast we can't measure it. So there's a whole other side to Tesla. You never end with learning about it. The fundamental structure of space is involved, what gravity is. Gravity is linked to electromagnetism. All of that is
Wow.
actually also part of Tesla's theories.
Okay, my special guest is Marc J. Seifer. The book is Tesla, Wizard at War, The Genius, the Particle Beam Weapon, The Pursuit of Power. Tesla developed some other great inventions also. In 1931, he had something called the Pierce Arrow car. What was that all about? And how did that kind of evolve into current? I guess the thinking was free technology, free energy, was kind of behind that. And it seems like an underlying theme in Tesla's work to be able to tap into all the energy that's out there. So we didn't need coal or fossil fuels, etc.
That's exactly what it is. What Tesla felt, he was very aware of ecology. Why sap the earth of its natural resources of oil and coal? His hydroelectric power system was hooked to the wheelwork of the universe. That's what he says. If we could hook our star to the wheelwork of universe. So it's a recurring energy. It's running on a waterfall. So he knew that, cars and airplanes, they use a tremendous amount of fuel. If instead we could beam the electricity to the cars and the airplanes, we wouldn't have to use any fuel at all. So part of his idea of Wardenclyffe, of the Great Wireless Tower, was to transmit energy to cars and to airplanes. And one of them was this Pierce Arrow, and there's a big mystery of whether he actually built this Pierce Arrow, which was an electric car, which is getting all of its energy from Niagara Falls. And I go into that in depth, and there's a big question whether or not he actually built this car. But I do think that he stands for a future goal and an ideal, and that is we've got to get off oil, we've got to get off coal, and there has to be a way. I think it's nuts when we send a rocket ship up to the moon, all the fuel that we're using. I have a feeling that there's an electromagnetic way. We see the UFOs can do it, that there's a way to escape the gravity of the Earth by not using any fuel, but by using electromagnetic, a better understanding of electromagnetism. I think all that is hidden in Tesla's technologies.
It could even be, he doesn't mention this, but thinking about like using crystal power and things like that. But you would think that going forward, there could be some type of chip or something in a vehicle that could propel it. It's just so amazing to me that cars in our lifetime, Mark, have really not changed all that much until the Tesla, which is like a computer with a car built around it, versus the traditional vehicles, and that air travel is basically the same as it was 50 years ago. And that also, like, we went to the moon in the 60s and nobody's has gone back to the moon really since then. It just seems like everything, and even though there's been a lot of advances in medicine and technology, etc., it seems like a lot of other things could have gone and could be going a lot faster. What are your thoughts on that from doing all your research and studying a guy so brilliant and visionary as Tesla?
Well, I think he stands for an ideal. Growing up as a kid, one of my heroes was Jacques Cousteau. And the reason why was because Jacques Cousteau studied nature, but he used high technology to study nature. And Tesla was of the same mind. One of his good friends was John Muir, Muir Woods. He was an ecologist, helped start, the great reservations out, Yosemite National Park, all that came from Muir. That was Tesla's thinking. How can we advance this planet without sapping it of its natural resources? And I think that that's all linked to exactly what you're saying. So that to me is that's why he should be studied, because there's so many aspects to his life. But I think that that's really the goal.
Okay.
And I think that I foresee that highways will have a way to generate electricity as the car drives along the highway. The one other thing I wanted to mention was the reason why it's called Tesla Motors. Tesla invented an electric car back in 1904, and the two guys that invented it, Tarpaning and Eberhard, those guys had read Tesla's article from 1904, and that's what
Amazing.
prompted them to build the electric car.
Amazing. Last question, and I'm loving this conversation, Mark. Thank you so much. Telephotography. Tesla claimed that you could actually photograph people's thoughts. I mean, that's brilliant. It's so far in advance, and it's like a way of mind reading and putting it on a screen. Could you quickly just tap into that real quick for us?
Yes. Tesla felt that if you could somehow read out the retina, that you would be able to see people's thoughts. And I saw a show on 60 Minutes, came from MIT. I don't know the guy's name, it's in my book, but he came up with the exact same idea, only putting it on the voice box. So how do you harness something on the retina? So he has a device on the voice box. Now, when you think of a word, if you just think of a word and don't say the word, the impulse is still sent to the voice box. So Scott Pelley asked the guy, how much is 600,000 times 742? And he thinks those things. He sends it by means of various mechanisms to the internet, to Google. Google does the stuff, comes back into his earpiece, and he says whatever the answer is. And then Scott Pelley asked him, what's the capital of Bulgaria? And he says what the capital is because he's used to that. So Tesla wanted to harness the retina. This guy has actually harnessed the voice box without invading the body. So I think that it's very close to what Tesla wanted to do.
Amazing. My special guest, once again, Marc J. Seifer. Mark, tell us how people can find out more about you and your work with Tesla and all your other work, like on handwriting.
Yes, I'm also a handwriting expert, and I'm a novelist. I've written 4 novels.
Okay.
My name is Marc Seifer, MarcSeifer, so it's just marcseifer.com. And of course, the book, Tesla Wizard at War, is available on Amazon, also Barnes and Noble. I'm easy to get to.
Okay. Sounds great. All right. Thanks for being on the show. We'll talk about maybe your handwriting book in the future. All right.
Thanks so much, Robert.
All right. Thank you, Mark.
If you're enjoying the content and the guests I bring you each and every week to Guys Radio and TV, please subscribe to our channels. Thanks for your support.